Today, I'm going to explain a horror thriller movie called Dracula 3000. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie opens with a video recording of a man named Captain Varna, who is aboard a spaceship called Demeter. He holds a crucifix in his hand and speaks about an impending disaster, while a machine in the background counts down to self-destruction. But moments later, the machine announces that the self-destruction has been aborted, and the system has returned to normal. Upon hearing this, Captain Varna screams, and the video feed suddenly cuts out. The scene then shifts to the year 3000, where we see a deep space salvage ship named Mother 3. Van Helsing, the ship's captain, announces that after 50 years of being lost, they have finally discovered the abandoned spaceship Demeter. Van Helsing and his crew are therefore on a mission to investigate it, hoping to return it to Earth and salvage it for money. Next, we meet the rest of the crew, which includes Vice Captain Aurora, a stoner named 187, and a disabled professor named Arthur who uses a wheelchair. Why do space movies never have people who could feasibly go to space? Then there's a muscle man named Humvee and the navigation intern, Mina. At first, only Mina and Humvee board the Demeter and explore its interior, while the others monitor them from Mother 3. The two soon realize that the ship is completely empty, and when they remove their masks, they notice a foul smell in the air. Despite this, they assume the ship is safe and decide to invite the rest of the team aboard. The crew is then divided into groups, and they begin to explore the various sections of the ship. We then return to Captain Varna's video log from the year 2950. He states that the engine is not working and the communication system is also down. He mentions that more than half of the crew has become infected with something he has never seen before. As a result, the few unaffected individuals have locked themselves in their quarters, but are unsure how long they can survive in this condition. In the present, the team is exploring the ship when they discover the corpse of Captain Varna in one of the rooms. The deceased is tied to a chair and clutching a crucifix, which astounds everyone. Van Helsing then announces that they should return the ship home and also give this man a proper burial. However, Aurora protests, claiming they do not know what happened to the ship or this person. She suggests they leave and simply report it to the authorities, but the men left and insult her. The spaceship Mina also claims to have a bad feeling about the situation, but the others dismiss this as well. It turns out that they could earn around $15 million for this ship, so they do not want to pass up such an opportunity. Even if adjusted for inflation, that's about $3. However, just as the crew is about to return, Mother 3 abruptly detaches from the Demeter. Arthur tries to regain control, but his efforts are futile, leaving them stranded in Demeter with no way to communicate. Meanwhile, Humvee and 187 follow the source of the foul odor and arrive at a room filled with coffins. 187 speculates that the coffins might contain some space weeds and proceeds to open one. However, he's disappointed to discover that there's nothing inside except some sand, which she will likely attempt to roll into a doobie. Following this, Humvee suggests they return to the rec room to rejoin the others, but 187 decides to stay behind to open more coffins in hopes of finding weed. Unfortunately, as soon as Humvee departs, 187 is mysteriously attacked by an unseen figure. In another part of the ship, Van Helsing is watching a video log of Captain Varna, hoping to find some information. In the video, the captain reveals that they were departing from a planet called Transylvania with a shipment of coffins. Van Helsing is then suddenly startled by a loud scream and rushes towards it. The rest of the team also hears the sound and gathers in the room with the coffins. They discover 187 there, who is severely injured and has a bone protruding from his knee. The man tries to say something, but before he can, he ends up passing out. Following this, the team brings 187 to the rec room and places him on a stretcher. Aurora then tends to his leg, and after that, everyone returns to their tasks. Arthur later calls Van Helsing over and shows him that 187 has bite marks on his neck. The two attempt to figure out what caused it, but all of a sudden, 187 wakes up. His eyes are glowing red, and fangs are emerging from his mouth. The man immediately throws Arthur out of his wheelchair and violently beats him. A horrified Van Helsing tries to stop him, but is effortlessly chucked across the room. At this moment, Aurora arrives in the room and shoots 187 multiple times, but even the bullets have no effect on him, and 187 begins rambling about how he will have his way with her before finally killing her. This terrifies Aurora, and she immediately runs off with 187 chasing her. As he runs through the ship, he comes across a mysterious figure in one of the rooms. 187 187 then immediately drops to his knees, calling him master and pledging his loyalty. In response, the mysterious figure tells him to kill his friends if he wishes to please him. 187 obeys the command and runs off to begin his killing spree. Later, while hiding in one of the rooms, Aurora is approached by the same mysterious man. He seems mesmerized by her and says he has never seen a creature so beautiful. "You are giving me 1, 2, 3 little bones. Ah, ha, ha." "Oh no, it's just one." She asks who he is and what he wants, so he introduces himself as Count Orlok. After creepily caressing her body, he approaches Aurora's neck to bite her, but the scene abruptly cuts before we can see what happens. Elsewhere, Mina is tending to Arthur's wounds, and the man is still shaken by what happened. To comfort him, Mina grabs a gun and goes outside to check. She reveals that there is no one, and asks the professor to relax. But just then, 187 shows up and immediately attacks her before closing the door on Arthur. The terrified professor then bangs on the door and yells at the man to leave Mina alone, but to no avail. Later, the remaining 3 arrive in the room, and Arthur tearfully informs them about what happened to Mina. Meanwhile, Aurora tells the group about her encounter with Orlok. She reveals that he's from Transylvania, which is a planet of vampires. She further explains how their planet is now dead, so Orlok paid to have a bunch of coffins picked up, and he was in one of them. Aurora also states how they accidentally woke him up, and now he is hungry for their blood. This means that he will eventually eat them and turn them into vampires. Everyone is shocked by the revelation, but they're even more confused as to why Orlok would let Aurora go unharmed. She tries to reason that maybe she's not his type, but the others don't believe that. They then examine her body for any bite marks, but there are none. Aurora begs them to trust her and insists she's not a vampire, but despite this, a suspicious Van Helsing ties her up, just in case she's lying and plans to attack them. He then orders Humvee to keep an eye on her while he and Arthur go out to the main deck to start the ship. Afterward, Aurora tries to convince Humvee to release her, but he refuses to listen. She even tries to seduce him by offering to strip her naked to check for bite marks, but Humvee still refuses. "Doing just 'cause one ends Humvee, I'm stupid." Elsewhere, Arthur and Van Helsing search the internet about Count Orlok and discover that Orlok is just a pseudonym for Dracula. While researching vampire lore, they learn that these vampires were once defeated by a man named Van Helsing centuries ago. Arthur then tells his captain that he must be related to the original. This could be why they are here, and Dracula is looking for him to exact his revenge. However, Van Helsing doesn't believe this and says that maybe the whole thing is just a coincidence, or the imaginings of a stoned idiot trying to break into Hollywood. Meanwhile, Aurora is still persuading Humvee to let her go when 187 starts banging on the door outside. He cries and begs to be let in, claiming that he's about to die and requires urgent help. Aurora tells Humvee not to open the door, but the man feels bad because 187 is a close friend. After much persuasion, he finally opens the door and allows his friend in. However, this proves to be a huge mistake, as 187 immediately changes his attitude and attacks Humvee. Hearing the screams, Van Helsing rushes in and shoots 187 several times, but nothing happens to him. He instead begins bragging about how he's a vampire and immortal. While 187 is distracted, Humvee sneaks up behind him and drives a pool cue through his heart. This turns out to be effective, prompting the vampire to finally collapse. Next, Aurora asks the men to release her, but they're still suspicious of her. Van Helsing wants to know why Dracula didn't bite her when he had the opportunity. With no other option, Aurora finally admits that she is not a real person, but rather a robot. It turns out that she works for a company called NWC, the New White Chicks, and they sent her undercover to investigate the crew's activities. She has no blood and thus serves no purpose to Dracula. Upon hearing this, Humvee feels betrayed and tries to shoot the robot. However, Van Helsing stops him and releases Aurora, realizing they can use her as a weapon against Dracula. After this, the 3 head to the main deck and join Arthur. They inform him about what just happened with 187, and Arthur reveals that a wooden object is a very effective way to kill a vampire. He also mentions that other methods include the crucifix and sunlight, which vampires are terrified of. The crew thus decides to point the ship toward a binary star system near the sun to finally get rid of the vampire. However, it turns out that it will take them 13 hours to get there, so Aurora and Van Helsing decide to go find some more wooden objects. They manage to find several billiard cues and head to the room filled with coffins to find Dracula. The two start opening the coffins one by one, but the majority of them are empty. At one point, they come across their own friend Mina lying in a coffin, but before she can cause any real damage, Aurora pierces her heart with the billiard cue. Mina then regains consciousness and screams loudly before collapsing again. At this moment, another coffin bursts open, and Dracula emerges from it. Realizing they can't fight him alone, Van Helsing urges Aurora to find reinforcements, and she obliges. He then confronts Dracula and reveals that he's the descendant of the original vampire slayer, Hugh Jackman. Surprisingly, instead of being afraid, Dracula is overjoyed as he can finally exact his revenge for all the deaths of his family members. Meanwhile, Aurora arrives at the main deck and begs for Humvee's help, but he thinks it's the vampire messing with him again and refuses to come out. In the end, a frustrated Aurora takes the crucifix from the former captain's corpse and sets out to kill the vampire herself. Humvee also changes his mind a while later and goes after her. Meanwhile, Arthur becomes terrified and begs them not to leave him alone. He struggles to drag his wheelchair and tries to follow them, but he soon encounters Dracula. Arthur pleads for mercy, and Dracula promises that he won't hurt him. He also says he can give him new legs and allow him to walk again, which gives the professor hope. Dracula then extends his hand to him. "Come to me!" And the professor reaches out for it without hesitation. On the other hand, Aurora and Humvee finally return to Van Helsing, who's badly injured. They try to help him up, but Van Helsing's face suddenly turns sinister. It turns out that he has also become a vampire and proceeds to attack them. He is about to bite Humvee, but Aurora pulls the billiard cue from Mina's body and drives it into Van, killing him. This act revives Mina once again, and she attempts to attack Aurora. However, the brave robot uses her crucifix to keep the vampire away. Humvee then seizes the opportunity to impale Mina with another cue, causing her to collapse again. Later, when the duo returns to the deck, they find the professor passed out. Not knowing what to do, Aurora repeatedly stabs him with the crucifix. Arthur wakes up for a few seconds before collapsing, and it turns out he had already transformed into a vampire. At this moment, a furious Dracula proceeds to enter the deck, and the duo tries to stop him. In the end, they successfully manage to close the door on Dracula, cutting off his arm in the process. As the Demeter draws closer to one of the binary stars, Humvee and Aurora confess to each other that neither knows how to pilot the ship. However, the two are at least relieved by the fact that Dracula's plan to infiltrate Earth has failed. Aurora then reveals that before she was a narc, she was a pleasure robot, and suggests they become intimate. This is music to Humvee's ears, and they thus spend the last few hours of their lives making love. Over! Later, we see a video log of Captain Varna one last time, where he announces his intention to sacrifice himself and his ship. The movie then ends with Demeter finally reaching the binary star. However, since they don't know how to steer it, the spaceship explodes, killing everyone on board, including Humvee, Aurora, and Orlok.